Welcome to this discussion regarding a topic very important in order to make innovations have a real impact in our societies, on our economies, and for the environment. Yes, we are going to talk about standards and how standards can bridge the gap between innovations and the market. My name is Magnus Davidsson. I work for SIS, the Swedish Institute for Standards, which is a part of ISO, the International Standardization Organization. Today we are going to talk about mainly three topics. First of all, the role of standards in our society. And secondly, and that's maybe the most important or the largest part of our discussion, is how innovation and standards match together and how companies can use standards as a part of their innovation strategy when they try to bring their innovations out to the market. And thirdly, we're going to talk about sustainability and standards and how they connect and how standards can be one part of when we try to solve our sustainability challenges. We have four distinguished guests with us today. It is Fröjdh, who is Vice President International Standards at Ericsson. Welcome. And we have Johan Ek Weis, who is Project Manager at Chalmers Industriteknik Group. Thank you, welcome. And we have Christofer Laurell, Senior Vice President Research and Public Affairs at Einride. Welcome also to you. Well, welcome to all of you, and we will soon hear more from you. But first of all, before we start up the discussion, we are very grateful to have ISO's President Ulrika Franke with us here today. She will introduce the subject of today, so I just say welcome Ulrika, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for that introduction. Standards organizations have been around for more than 100 years. ISO, a newcomer in that sense, has only 75 years of existence. And standard organizations promote best practices. That was it all about, to share the knowledge about best practice. There are many standards around, but not all of them are created in an open process, like ISO standards are. And that is to give assurance to consumers and industry that all different aspects are considered when created a standard. Standards are also connected to the international trade system. And when you create agreements between different countries, WTO, the World Trade Organization, is a very serious component in that work. And ISO is considered and recognized by WTO as such an organization. So if you have an ISO standard, you can be sure that that also means that you can trade on that standards between different countries. Some people would argue that standards are not a good way to promote scientific findings. I would say it's the reverse. If you have new findings, if you're an industry or you're on a university or a high school or polytechnical high school, to connect your findings to a standard is probably the best way to make them be used in real life to assure that they are also part of what evolves in society. Some would say that that is not the case at all. Standards are set in stone and they don't evolve. And I would say that is not true. All standards evolve over time and reacts to the new way we live, to the new scientific findings that were out there, and the needs of society as a whole. That's the importance of having committees that work over time in the ISO system. Now these days, sustainability is a very important issue. And of course, ISO as an organization has adapted to that way also. We made a declaration 2 years ago in London for our climate action when it comes to standards. We've gone through all standards to see if they will take us to the Paris goals, the Paris Agreement in 2030. And we have detected about 500 standards that need to change to make that possible, to be a helpful tool when it comes to reaching the sustainability goals. And that is also why I think world leaders today are looking to standards as a system, as a tool to create a good path to sustainability. To have that in an open process where everybody can add in to what is needed. So sustainability will be one of the key issues for ISO going forward, to see that we also add in to this work on creating a better situation when it comes to the climate. Thank you.
Thank you, Ulrika. Ulrika, you talked a little bit about how standards can help innovation and help companies bring out products to the market. But do you think, are people and companies aware enough of that important role that standards can play in innovation?
No, I think that is the problem really for organizations like SEAS and ISO, that we're a secret to most people. People are not aware of the system and how it works and how it can evolve issues in society and bring out products into society. So I think that is one of the things that we have to be much better at, explaining what we can do.
Thank you. Well, now we have dug into our first subject of the day, that is the role and importance of standards in our societies. And I would like to start with you, Per. You are at Ericsson. You are Vice President International Standards. So Ericsson is a big company, so I know this is a very big question for you to answer, but what do standards mean to Ericsson?
The short answer is they mean everything. Since everything we do, we make huge mobile systems, we make products for connecting people. So everything needs to be standardized. We need to have an economy of scale. We need to have interoperable systems. We need to have a world market where we sell products. So if people are going to talk to each other or communicate with each other, it all relies on standards. So that's core for our business.
That's a base for your business, a core for your business.
Yes.
So since it's so important, could you tell us a little bit about how you have organized your work with standardization within Ericsson?
Yes. Since it's, we're a big company, we're more than 100,000 employees. And so we have a CTO office where we have a standards group. So I belong to our standards group, and that's where we coordinate our activities in all different organizations where we're active, and also our strategies, what we need to achieve and how we will do that. And then we have lots of people at Ericsson that work it can be in different research units, it can be in product development units, it can be in other business functions, where we develop standards, we develop products, and a lot of these people are also involved in the standards work. So we try to sort of have a group function where we do the coordination, and then we have a really distributed network of people that are active in the standards.
And in many countries as well, I guess.
In many countries. Ericsson is worldwide, and we have product development and research in many countries. And Sweden is, of course, where the head office is, but we are all over the world.
Thank you, Per. We will get back to you later. Now we're moving to a company that is not as old as Ericsson, a lot younger. A company that delivers new solutions in a quite established market, the market of freight transport or transport. A company that develops and sells solutions regarding electrification and autonomization of transports. I'm talking about Einride, and I'm talking about you, Christofer Laurell. Welcome also to you. Could you tell us just in a short words, what is that Einride does?
Thank you so much for inviting us to be part of this panel. Let me start by saying that the transportation sector hasn't changed in 100 years. We have a diesel-based transportation system that is creating 7 to 8% of the global emissions each year. We have fill rates of trucks in the current transportation system that is around 50%. Not more, not less. And on top of that, we also have a lot of social issues that manifest themselves in driver shortages, for example. That is a worldwide problem. So what we do at Einride is to challenge a system that hasn't undergone change for many decades. And we do that with new technology. We do it with digitalization, electrification, and autonomous solutions. So by using all these technology shifts that are taking place in the market and in society at large, we build solutions for not making minor changes to the transportation system that we have today. Rather, we are building a new one.
Okay, so I guess just from hearing you speak, I can imagine that standardization is quite important for you, for instance, when it comes to safety aspects or when it comes to interoperability aspects between the different parts. So could you also tell us a little bit how you have decided to work with standards and standardization within your company?
You're absolutely right, meaning that if we were to take on one of these challenges, electrifying, for example, or digitalizing, that would be a huge one to take on. We are doing all three, which means that we cannot invent every wheel that is out there. So using standards as our point of departure and building innovation on top of that, that's really the core of what we are doing. And what we are also doing is collaborating with companies like Ericsson, for example. So standards enables us to interlink with a lot of the actors that are leading in bringing new technology to market, like we see when it comes to 5G, for example. So for us, standards are very important indeed.
Thank you. Moving on to you, Johan Ek Weis. You don't work for a company that produces stuff. You work for an organization working with innovation, and especially innovation connected to sustainability. You yourself, you have the emphasis on graphene, the material graphene, which is a growing field, and you are leading large innovation programs on European level, and also you are chairing the Swedish standardization committee for this. Could you tell us just in short words, in what areas can graphene be an important innovation?
Well, maybe one small clarification first. So I'm not leading the whole graphene flagship there, but the standardization part of this, which is a very important side. Now I actually forgot what you asked.
I asked you if you could give some examples about how graphene can be an important innovation in what areas.
So graphene, as you said, it's a new material. It can come actually almost everywhere. I mean, there are projects on just reinforcing almost anything, like different polymers, plastics, making them stronger. It can be to get into electronics, to help in 5G or in the next generations, create completely new technologies, new electronics, a lot in optoelectronics. But that takes a little bit more effort. But it's also a little bit more incremental improvements. So for example, making some plastics 20% stronger. Might not sound too sexy, but if you can do that by just adding a fraction of a percent of a new material, that's actually pretty good. So there are a lot of different things you can do, and I would say that one of the strengths, but maybe also a little bit of a challenge, is that the material really can get into almost any field. So that means that there are loads of possibilities, but it's not really focused on one aspect. So although the graphene flagship is like Europe's largest research initiative ever with 1 billion euros, if you spread it out over loads of different fields, it's kind of scattered, and that 1 billion euros don't really go that far in each area. But a lot has happened, and a lot more is coming.
Okay, thank you. So if we look at it from this perspective, what role can standards play for a whole innovation area, so to speak? Graphene.
I would say they're super important. And maybe coming back to a little bit what you were saying before, Ulrika, that you need to have standards also for new materials to actually go somewhere. Because it's super important in the whole innovation process. Because otherwise, you can have the scientists at the universities and everywhere making fantastic stuff, but it will never reach a final product. You need to connect it into the existing technologies. And then you need to really be able to communicate in between. You need to have both the vocabulary, but also like the standards of how should we characterize this? Exactly what is this, so that we know that it fits into the next step in the value chain. So it's super important. And something that we work on a lot, but it does take time. But it's super important to do.
Thank you. So now we have automatically moved into our second subject of today. That is innovation and standards, and how standards can help innovations to reach the market. And you talked a little bit about that in your speech there, Ulrika. And I would like to start by asking you, because that's sometimes said that standards hinder or is an obstacle to innovation. What do you have to say about that?
I think that's a misunderstanding, really, because when a committee works on a subject, it's not finished for all time. It keeps evolving. So there are new issues coming up, new problems coming up, new demands coming up, and that committee will then take that on and start, handling all those issues going forward, evolving with society, evolving with the technical innovations that are there. So they don't stop when they've created a standard. They do exist going on. So I think that is a misunderstanding, that something ends for a technical committee when they've created a standard. It's not like that. We have point 1, point 2, point 3, point 4, point 5, and standards are more, I think, perceived as a family. When we talk about, from an ISO perspective, about 25,000 standards, I would say it's more like standard families, because we keep evolving, and you can see point 2, point 3, point 4, and they might go in different directions as well. So it's a misunderstanding that they conserve something over time. It evolves over time.
What do you others say about that? Do you agree, or do you have any experience of that?
Absolutely. Now, I would say, especially like for emerging technologies, like the whole area changes. So of course the standards have to change as well with the growing field.
Yeah,
clearly.
Yeah, we can always do better. I mean, like, just look at the mobile systems, like from Ericsson. 3G was big 20 years ago, then 4G, 5G came out 2020. Now we're looking to the 6G coming out in 2030. So in each generation, we do better. We have much higher requirements. And so just the fact that we are standardizing these systems means that we are driving innovation. So it's really core for innovation. And with an open standards forum, everyone is welcome to the table. So we really compete to do the best solutions. So it is competition and innovation.
Thank you. So just I was thinking about one thing when you talked earlier, Per. You're 100,000 employees. You have resources, about 100,000
I don't know the exact number.
to involve in standardization. And
right.
Ulrika, you are president of ISO. How do you think that maybe smaller companies, maybe startups, so on, how can they get involved in standardization?
I think that is one of the issues that we have to look into more deeply than we've done before, because there is it takes time to be involved in standards, and there's some cost connected to it as well. So that is an issue. I know on the European level, there is a certain organization that handles small and medium-sized companies, and I think that is something for ISO also take on when we go forward. And it's also especially for the developing countries, where they have mostly small and mid-sized companies if you compare to Ericsson. And we want them to come on board as well in the standardization world. So that is an issue for us to make that work.
Thank you. I'm moving on with some questions regarding innovation and standards. Maybe to you, Johan. I was thinking about if you manage or work in an innovation program like you do both on European level and on Swedish level, how do you think standards should be integrated into an innovation program? Do you have any ideas or thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think it should be clear early on that this is an important part, and I think it relates to what you were discussing just before as well, because so this SIO graphene, so the Swedish level here, we've been going now for 9 years, and in the beginning everyone knew that standards are super important. Like, it's something that we need to work on. We need to make standards for this new field. But everyone was kind of like, yeah, someone else should do it. Everyone knew like that. Or early on, it was kind of clear that it was many smaller companies driving the innovation, as they're often more agile. They can jump onto things a little bit faster. But then they don't have time to focus on standardization. It's not easy, and to get it over the barrier into that field, they needed to focus on other things. After a while, we realized that we were actually the ones that were perfectly suited to do this, because we had the connections with the whole field. We knew what everyone needed, and we then could kind of take sort of an umbrella role to represent many different companies and help them getting into standardization, maybe let the SMEs and the key people focus on what they know, and then bring that over to the standardization table and kind of speak for them as well. So I think it should be in there quite early on, and I think it's important as well to have it both in the innovation programs, but also have organizations that maybe not have kind of their own agenda, that that's we are not pushing one product so that everything is for that product, but more can take a larger picture and help the whole field. I think that's very important.
And that's also one of the advantages with standardization and how it is organized, that you have participants from many areas, and from consumer organizations, and from authorities, and from research, and from producing companies. So that's one of the advantages.
And everyone gets their say.
Yeah, exactly. What's your experience, Johan, in a research program? Do you think that standardization started, or the work with standardization starts early enough, or is it added on later, or maybe too late? What's your opinion?
I think it was realized very early on that work needed to be done, but then it takes time to get enough people and the right organization really engaged. So maybe again what you said before, that we know, at least we know, that this is important, but to get the message across of how important it is, and also maybe be even more clear about how it works, and really help all these organizations that know that they will need standards in 3-5 years, but they don't have the time or the manpower to focus on it now, to help them really get into it. We need to focus on it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So Per and Christofer, I guess your companies, I assume your companies have also been involved in various innovation programs. Do you have any opinion about whether standardization is included early enough or enough at all?
Well, we are. I mean, from Ericsson, I mean, when you say innovation programs, like there are many programs within the EU where we are participating. So we have quite a lot of research going on at Ericsson, and they participate in many of these EU projects. And we see that that is often sort of a seed or growth for where standards will make a big impact. So they go hand in hand, basically.
Christofer, do you have any opinion regarding that aspect?
Yeah, going back to standards versus innovation and that notion, we are a bit different compared to Ericsson. For example, we don't have 100,000 employees yet. But with that said, we also sort of see that the type of companies that have come to change a lot of markets during the last decade or so, with Uber and Airbnb, the speed in which they change markets and the speed in which they create a lot of turbulence, not only in the market, but also societal turbulence, if I put it like that. That is something that we haven't seen before. And when we sort of see what is happening now, technology shifts are, from where we are standing, manifesting in a completely different way compared to how they used to. When the internal combustion engine was invented, we had decades to figure things out. And usually technology shifts, they happened sequentially. But now we see that we have a lot of technology shifts that are happening in parallel. In our particular space, electrification, digitalization, and autonomous technology is really at the core of it. And for an actor that hasn't really reached 100,000 employees yet, to work in all these spaces and building solution in the intersection, that is a challenge. But what we sort of see is that what really can make innovation and standards come together as one is when we have the speed that is necessary for actors like ourselves. We are very different. If you compare to other organizations that might have 5 or 10 years on hand, we might have 5 or 10 weeks because of the speed in which we are driving change and transformation. So that is sort of what we see when it comes to these interplays. What we also see from our perspective is that there is one thing that can enable us to get the same sense of urgency, the same of time, and that is everything that is happening now related to the green transition. So the green transition and the way in which we need to really transform society and industry across both sides of the Atlantic, but also beyond, I think that's the opportunity to ensure that all actors that are driving change have a seat at the table and also have what they need in order for us to really set the bar high when it comes to how the future of industries will look like going forward.
Another question to you, Christofer. I guess there are a lot of standards important for you, for your products to be able to come out to the market. What are the, and I guess a lot of standards have been developed or are being developed, but what are the main challenges when it comes to standards? Is there one particular area that is more difficult than others?
I think it comes back to the speed and the scale and the ambition for especially the ones that have the ambition of creating something new, that have a lot of disruptive ambitions, if I put it like that. I'm not sure whether we have figured out whether the products that comes from Lime and Voi and so on and so forth, whether they should be understood as bikes or mopeds. That's one illustration of what we have been discussing when it comes to speed. I think there is so much opportunity to use new technology to create a lot of change going forward and reinventing industry. So standards will have an essential role in that process, but if we can find new ways of working with particularly the speed dimension, that's key for us. With that said, we cannot reinvent every wheel there is. So just to take one example, we are working with TK240, we are working with TK217, and using what is already there and building on top of that. That helps actors like ourselves that have a lot of work in front of them when it comes to figuring out how we'll be able to use the new technology in the best way possible.
Yeah, I was just thinking of that as well, because I mean, you work with standards maybe more than we do, but you work at a completely different level, because those standards are relevant for something that's way higher up in the value chain. If you come from with a new company or a new material, new technology, you need to develop first all the standards kind of within that field so that you can control everything that's happening there. And then you need to find as well like the connection into the existing standards or the ones that you already work with. So the new field, it's not just defining yourself, but also the connections and using what already exists, but do that in a proper way.
Yeah. Do you agree, Per? Ulrika, maybe? Yeah.
We have recognized the importance of speed, and we are at ISO now working to see if there's something we can do about that, and to speed things up, and maybe to be, let something come out from a technical committee that is good enough, but not entirely solid, because it's still in a process, it will evolve and so on. So we're working on different aspects on that. But there is a trade-off here, because when you go to the financial system, they are also concerned that ISO standards have a high quality. And if you have investments, especially you go into the new environmental areas, which are new, the investors will say, what kind of standards have you used for your products? Are they the solid products? So there is something there. We won't promise anything that we can't keep. So we have to be assured that the ISO brand is not jeopardized when we go forward and try to speed things up, because then we haven't helped anybody.
I guess it's always a balance.
So there is a balance here, but we have recognized the problem, and we're looking into that.
Yeah, and on the speed issue, we see, of course, that some things require very fast standardization, and some things is planning like maybe a decade ahead. So when we do spectrum regulation, we really think about things that's going to happen 10 years from now, maybe. And then in other organizations where we're active, it can be about internet development or open source. Things happen sort of more on a weekly basis sometimes. But it's important and very important that you have a process, so that there is a stamp of approval or quality, so that what you produce is something that is really useful. I appreciate ISO and other organizations that they really have a rigid process so that we know that when we develop something that it will hold. There's a quality stamp also.
Maybe from a Swedish perspective here as well. I mean, we want to be a high-tech country. We say that we're a high-tech country, and a lot of high-tech, deep-tech, everything that's coming, things go fast. So in order for us to actually really be able to take advantage of these new materials, we have loads of good people, loads of good companies, but for it to actually make an impact, we need to have these standards, and then they cannot take too long time. Then we just we fail ourselves.
Yeah.
Per, you're a large company, and I keep going on about that. I'm sorry. So we all understand that standards and harmonizations are very important things when it comes to 4G, 5G, etc. But are there any particular, more specific area where you have experienced that standards was challenging to develop or very crucial? Could you have an
that's
example?
a very difficult question.
Yeah.
As you said, standards come in. They're so important for everything we do. It's from radio communication, it's from core network communication, it's sort of services, it's the internet, fiber, quality, safety. I mean, they're all interplay. And it is, of course, a challenge to develop all of these. But it's a very rewarding challenge. One part of it is that, it's competition. Because, we want to drive technology. We want to have the best solutions. So we invite everyone to the table. Everyone competes. So when we go to standards meeting, we don't know that we will go home and have an Ericsson stamp of approval, or an ISO stamp of approval of an Ericsson technology. But we have to really show why our solution is better than our competitors. And we fight. And we do that quite a lot. So it's a continuous battle. But this really makes sure also that we always pick the best solution. And in the end, I think that's a winning solution for everyone, that the best technology will be standardized. At least that's how we want it. And then we can compete with products that sort of within that standard, how we can differentiate. But we really need to have the best solutions standardized. My background is in multimedia. I worked a lot with video compression, audio and speech compression, streaming, television, and there are hundreds of companies that come and work on trying to figure out the best video compression algorithms. So it's people sit for 10 days, 24 hours, and work, and then they go home, and then they go back 3 months again and do the whole thing again. So that is a challenge, at least on the floor, to sort of prove that your technology is the best.
At SIS, we do investigations on what our participants think of standardization, and one thing that always comes up as an advantage is the network that you get when you participate in standardization work. Is that also what you think one of the great advantages? Perhaps when you work with an innovation and you can discuss with various people as much as you can discuss, of course. You can't discuss everything, but is that also your experience?
Absolutely.
The network is important?
Absolutely. Network is everything in developing new technologies, new products. If you make a great new product but no one knows about it, it doesn't matter. You need to connect it into the next step in the value chain. Absolutely.
Okay, you agree?
Yeah, definitely.
It was a leading question.
Just having a standard that doesn't solve anything. You have to promote it and make sure it's known and that people build products based on it. The next step after standardization can be promotion and really make sure that your standard or the standard that we have developed together gets used. So that's very important.
Thank you. I think we will move into our next subject of today, which is standards and sustainability. Ulrika, you talked about that in your speech in the beginning. ISO has a lot of ambitions regarding how standards can be a tool for sustainability. I was going to give you a more specific question. When it comes to new areas, innovative areas where there are no standards, how can ISO make sure that sustainability issues are thought of from the beginning and not added afterwards?
I think that's not a problem when it comes to new standards, because then it's much easier to say that this is on the table from the very beginning. So I don't think that with new standards is a problem. The problem is with the old standards, where you have committees that we have to sort of rearrange, remodel their standards so they are actually sustainable. And I think that is the issue, the challenge, not with the new standards. I think new areas much easier. You put it on the table from the beginning. Everybody knows and realizes. But when you go into an old standard that has been there for several years, it's much harder. How do we take sustainability into this, and how will it look like when it comes out? So that is the question. And we had about 500 standards that we saw that needed change. And then we have to add on the experts into those committees that can deliver that change. And that's the standard, finding the experts and so on. And that was also said it's a time issue. You have to get the right experts in, find the right people. So the old standards are really the challenge, not the new ones.
I would say also not just the old versus new standards, but maybe also old versus new technologies and fields. Because now sustainability is such a key question in everything and has been for a bunch of years. So everything that's reasonably new, like this is already baked in. So it's everywhere.
And I think that one of the issues is not only about the green issues that we have on, it's also about gender and inclusiveness and such things. So that has to be added in as well. And for some technical committees, this is totally new. When you talk about gender aspects, for instance. So I think that is, it's a cultural challenge in some ways, and it's also something that has technically hard to get into some of the standards.
Sometimes I think that if you're working at a company and one end of the corridor, the standardization expert sits, and he or she has been working in technical committee for many years. At the other end of the corridor are the sustainability department. And the sustainability department really wants to have sustainability into the standards, but maybe the technical expert is not so used to that.
It sounds like you're describing Ericsson.
Sorry.
Because I mean, we have a standards function, and we also have a sustainability and corporate responsibility function. But I mean, we do talk to each other. But I also think, like, I'm mostly working with developing new standards. And we have the United Nations 17 Sustainability Development Goals, and each of one is a call for action. And we often see that standardization is a way to find solutions to reach those goals. So that's part of ISO and also other organizations that you map when you develop a new standards. You try to sort of see how you can fulfill these SDGs, so Sustainability Development Goals. And so I think there is a lot of awareness in standardization that you really need to. So this climate action, infrastructure innovation, industry. There are many of these goals where we sort of try to make sure that we are part of the solution.
Thank you. Yeah. I was going to ask you, Christofer. I think your company or your products are sustainability, and especially the climate issue is at the core of those innovations. I was thinking, do you think that standards can help you show how good your solutions are? Are there standards that can help you to show that?
Well, going back to sustainability functions, we don't have one, because everyone is taking their point of departure from the fact that we need to make as much change as possible, because we are not on track, unfortunately. And what we need to do is to keep 1.5 alive, and we aren't there. But we have a lot of opportunities when it comes to new technology and also new standards in getting sustainability at the core of it, just like we see in our organization, but also a lot of the other organizations that are new, that have taken on the challenge of actually not only making minor improvements to the industries we have, but completely reinventing and reimagining them. What we also see from our perspective, going once again back to the 100,000 employees, is the fact that we as 500 need to work together with a lot of actors out there. We talked about innovation programs earlier. We talked about networks in the committees. And what we do a lot is to work together with stakeholders in all the research that we are doing. So one example, speaking about European projects, is the MODI project. It started a few months back, and it's the largest project that we have in the European Union, but perhaps also the world when it comes to autonomous solutions. We have a total of 30 actors that are part of that, and that sort of speaks to the need for new actors that are really having disruption and sustainability at the core to work in ecosystems together with other actors, because that's how we really change the systems of tomorrow. In our world, there are a lot of institutional frameworks that aren't in place yet. They haven't been invented yet. And starting with standards and then continuing from there and build these institutional frameworks that will help us to navigate how the new technology should be applied, not only in one market, but a lot of them. That's also a part of what we are sort of seeing from our perspective.
Okay. Thank you. I was thinking about you, Johan, working with graphene. I mean, I guess there are many sustainability aspects connected to graphene. What do you think there should be standards about when it comes to sustainability and graphene?
Ooh, good question. I would say that we touched upon it before, that most of the time when we talk about graphene and that it should come into any technology or have any function anywhere, sustainability is kind of built in there. Because it's not just that, we want to put graphene in there because it's fun, but here we can put it in, then we can use less material, or here we can do something more efficient. So I would say that, it's really, and I think it goes with many new technologies, that when the sustainability question is so ingrained in us now that it's in everything we do.
It's almost not
So
there. I mean, it's everywhere. And
I don't know. Maybe this also is this duality between an established older technology and something newer, that for us, even if we don't mention sustainability all the time, maybe we should do it more, but it's always there in the back of the mind that we are doing this. Like, the ultimate goal is always that we want to contribute to a more sustainable future. But perhaps we should be even more explicit about it.
But the current, of course, of a material like graphene, there can be positive sustainability aspect, but also could be potential hazards with it. So I guess it's both. Yeah,
sure. And the hazard aspects and really knowing everything about health and safety, environmental aspects, of course, that's super important. And there you have different legislations that's coming as well, or that has come in the last few years. For example, the REACH legislation that came now, a few years ago now, I guess. Yes. Time goes fast. And that goes hand in hand. It's very important that we have that as well, but it's not either that or standards. We need both. It's kind of different sides of sort of the similar coin.
So we're talking about sustainability and standards, and I would just like to ask you one last question there. And I've heard about that there are new audit principles coming, or maybe already implemented. How would that affect standardization? What do you say, Ulrika?
I think that will have a great impact on companies, the new audit standards, and I think companies will have to rely on standards to show auditors that they are say that they're done and reported on the right issues, and then they can refer to a standard. This is how we've done this. We followed that standard, and so on. So I think that is a key element that will push standardization and probably make companies more aware of what kind of help they can get from standardization, because otherwise there will be a lot of documentation to show what they have done, to prove them themselves. Now they can just say, we followed that and that standardization. So I think that will be a great advantage. And I don't think companies really are aware that the European Union is using reporting standards to push sustainability. So it's not only what you've done in the past, it is what you're going to do in the future. What are your goals? And then you will be audited on your own goals that you've set for yourself. And then you have to measure those goals. And how you do that? Do you follow a standard for measurement or not? So there will be a lot of things, I think, going forward around sustainability and standards and reporting. And for the EU companies who are working in the EU, which a lot of companies are, it will be mandatory. It's not voluntary anymore, it's mandatory. So I think this will have a huge impact, and I think standards can really help in that aspect.
So I guess that's something we will hear more and more about.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes. Okay, I would just like to summarize what we've discussed. We've had a very diverse discussion. We have talked about the opportunities with standards and to bring innovations out to the market, both during the innovation phase, where you can participate in standardization and get new inputs from that, and also actually that bringing on standards in your innovation work can help to promote your innovation and giving it credibility. That is some of the things that we have discussed. So I just want to say thank you to all the participants, and also thank you to you who have been watching and listening. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for
Thank
having
you.
us.
Thank you.
Thank you.